Morena whānau, we're going to make a start. Ka pai. Tū tira mai ngā iwi. Oi, there's always one in the house. Ka pai. Tēnā tātou. Nei te mihi kia koutou katoa, I tainga mai I raro I tēnei kaupapa Murihiku Regeneration, te Wananga nei. So welcome back, whānau. If you've just joined us for this, for today, welcome. I'll collect your $50 after this. For those that have come back after yesterday, well done to you all. Ladies and gentlemen, he mihi tēnei kia koe te minita, nō reira kia koe te minita rino, nau mai, hara mai. We look forward to the offers of money that you have for us today. We had offers yesterday. We're going to take them up too. Kia koe hoki te rangatira Waihopai, Michael, nei te mihi kia koe hoki, Sir Tim, nei te mihi kia koe. Koutou hoki, I Wainganui a tātou I te ata nei, nō reira tēnā koutou. Regardless of where you are, where you came from and who you are, a big mihi aroha kia koutou. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to kick it off. This morning's speakers on the kaupapa, TY, situation and the way forward. This should be exciting. Now, I've got 4 people on the on our Skype, on our Zoom hui, from the RPS group. Now, I hope I get this right. Arnard, Deutsch, right. Alistair Kingston, Ruairi, Hanley, and Timothy Cope. Nō reira, koutou mā, nau mai hara mai. And it's over to you. Kia ora, tēnā koutou.
Kia ora koutou. I'm Arnold Dutch. I hope you're hearing me well. Yep, excellent. So we would have loved to be with you today. It was actually a hope of us to be able to travel and be with you. But considering the situation, this isn't going to happen. I'm calling in this morning from the feet of the Waitakere Ranges here. West Auckland, and my colleagues are from across the Tasman Sea. As you can tell from my accent, I'm not your purebred Westie. So I'll put it out there right now. I'm from France. Now, fear not, supporters of the All Blacks, because I have sworn allegiance to the black jersey as well. However, it's always good to see a good game, isn't it? Now, we're really looking forward to this presentation because it's been about 15 years for me to be in New Zealand, and a lot of the work I've done has really helped me consider the value of the land and the future of Aotearoa. We're certainly established here as a family, and it's an honor for me to bring in the expertise of RPS as well, because I think we are doing some good work that will have some positive implication for the future. I'm going to try to switch to a presentation now, and I will ask you to kindly tell me if you can see a screen now that is mostly plum color. Can we all see it? Yep, very good. So you wouldn't know who RPS is, I suppose, but just to give you a very quick idea, we're a 50-year-old company created originally in the UK. We're now about short of 6,000 people across the world. We're working in the environments, the energy, the defense, the infrastructure sector. I'm not going to list everything here, but if you have any question, of course, you just reach out. We've got a great website as well. We want to go as quickly as possible into the subject of our presentation today, but I think before we get into that, it's important for you to understand that in the Australasia space, we're about 1,000 people, but in New Zealand itself, right now, there's probably, well, there are only 9 RPS employees right now in New Zealand. However, we have over the last few years brought into New Zealand a lot of the expertise that we have developed elsewhere, and that's quite relevant to what we're going to discuss today. We're established in New Zealand now across the defense sector, across regional councils and local governments, assets, portfolio delivery. We're also doing quite a bit of work in the regional rail and public transport space in transport planning. So all these are pieces of work that we have really focused on because they give us a chance to provide value as an independent and unbiased pragmatic advisor, if you want. We like to solve problems that matter. That's one of our motto. You will probably hear about that a bit more today. Generally speaking, it is all about bringing this expertise from the world when we can to New Zealand, where it is beneficial. So we are very much focusing on those things that matter because effectively, you know, there is no point telling people what they already know. So I will bring into this conversation today 3 speakers, and the reason why we are bringing them in is that we understand from the little involvement and review that we've done on your region, we understand that there's going to be several aspects to the challenges in the next years. We'll bring some pragmatic, technical experience with Rory Henley this morning. Rory is our practice lead in the contaminated land management space, has had a lot of experience in delivering technical environmental strategies and solutions for projects related to oil and gas, mining, landfills, rail, you name it, a lot of them. So after our quick presentation, you'll be able to ask him all sorts of questions, really. We will also be talking a lot in our presentation about the people aspect of very large remediation projects. Of course, there is no doubt that our only hope for us here in the room and in New Zealand nowadays, we want to leave it as well protected, as well developed, and as ready as possible for the future generations. And so understanding first what really we're trying to do is key there. So Alistair Kingston will be joining us. Alistair is our Executive General Manager for Insights, Communications and Creatives. But he's here today because he's had a lot of experience in very senior roles on major transports, energy, water, property projects, engaging with communities and leveraging on his delivery experience really provides the opportunity to create some meaningful engagement. So we will be talking a lot about that because it's obviously the starting point to proper design and project planning. Now, to take us through the whole subject of remediation, we will hear first from Tim Cope. Tim is our Executive General Manager. So remediation project management, i.e. how do you deal with complex situations that require remediation of industrial sites? That's very much what Tim is supporting and championing for RPS across the world. Tim has experience on several continents. He has been really the one helping clients navigate the uncertainty of those emerging situations where the complexity of the science, of the sites, of the needs of the stakeholders require a safe approach. So across the public and private sectors, on urban developments, airports, education, defense, you name it, it's all there. So with these three speakers, as you can see, we could be talking to you for 4 hours about very technical things, but that will bore you, and I can tell already because I can actually see you guys. I can tell that I'm boring you. So I'm going to stop now, and I'm going to hand over to Tim. I will join the conversation at the end of our presentation, where we hope to really have, an open chat to any sort of questions you might have. So Tim, if it's okay with you, I'll hand over to you now. I think you're still muted, but if you click the button, it's all yours.
Thank you, Anu. Very eloquent introduction. Thank you for that. But kia ora, tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you all very much for inviting us here today to share with you some of our knowledge and learnings from similar projects, and to outline the process and some of the key critical success factors throughout what will be a very long journey for you all, and what it means to you as a stakeholder in the process. Myself, as Anu mentioned, I'm the Executive General Manager focused on remediation projects for the Australia Asia Pacific region. I have a very long history with New Zealand. I have a Māori family. We're strongly rooted in New Zealand. However, today I'm speaking to you from the city of Canberra. So much of our learning has been captured through many projects across the globe, which have very similar characteristics as the Tiwai Point remediation project. There are many complexities associated with these projects, and it's important for each of you as stakeholders, and regardless of where you sit, noting everyone has a different vantage point and view on this complex issue, is to really get to understand the processes involved and appreciate the critical issues faced throughout each stage of the process. So we are here today to share some of our insights with you, and please, we look forward to receiving some of your questions at the end of the session, and we can hopefully clarify some of the questions you've come with today. The roots of our business are based in environmental management, and our Australian New Zealand business provides support to complex remediation challenges. many with very technically demanding issues centered around politically charged context, emotive community sentiment. Our focus is, as Anu mentioned, is to really navigate our clients and stakeholders through the uncertainty and complexities of contaminated lands within the evolving regulatory environment and to ensure the key objectives are achieved for all involved. We do this by providing advice and support across 3 key levels and sets of experience. Firstly, we position ourselves as trusted advisors. So for our clients, what does this mean? It's about providing an end-to-end program management and governance support. We are there to provide a framework, a structure, and governance to navigate the process and drive a successful outcome. We have the in-house technical subject matter expertise as well as the second point, and this is to steer the program aligned with the science and the required outcomes. Our environmental specialists assess the issues and develop practical and achievable solutions. And thirdly, but not lastly, we have the in-house communication and engagement skills delivered by skilled practitioners to ensure there is a balanced and considered approach taken in relation to the wider stakeholders and associated people involved with the program. Next slide, Anu. So on a global scale, RPS has considerable experience in the assessment and management of contaminated land. Our teams have expertise around the world in dealing with highly complex brownfield sites, industrial facilities, and solving land contamination legacy issues. Our deep knowledge across a broad range of sectors means that we can guide our clients through every project phase to provide peace of mind throughout the process. Our approach combines comprehensive project management principles with the required technical expertise and the supporting specialised stakeholder practitioners in the environmental remediation field. So this slide, this is really just highlighting a few sites across the globe where RPS has supported the remediation of similar heavily contaminated lands, and hoping to just to talk briefly to you about 4 of these and some of the comparisons that are drawn between the challenges faced by the TY Point and what we achieved in these global projects. So the first one, Valero Oil Terminal. So this project was focused on the risk assessment and compliance monitoring associated with the loss of containment. The compliance monitoring included extensive groundwater sampling and analysis, and it also centred around the offensive or off-site sources, the defensive, the internal sources, and the remediation monitoring, focused generally around the pollution management and integrity of the infrastructure. So as a comparison based on TY Point, the compliance monitoring for groundwater and the associated data collected via the monitoring strategy has enabled our client to refine and augment the site's mitigation controls in a proactive manner. And this has allowed us to minimise any potential risk of contaminated groundwater migrating off-site. The next one is a project conducted over in the UK, the Alcan Looms Lane landfill. So this has a very technically comparable side of it to TY Point, given the project focus was around aluminium dross waste tip that was creating very high levels of ammonia in the groundwater. And I'm sure you all understand the relevance of that, given the situation in TY. So RPS were heavily involved in the re-engineering design for the landfill compliance. And I guess in terms of the similarities of this project, it was really the byproduct of the smelting process. And we had to deal with a very complex landfill design due to the engineering aspects of Looms Lane. However, I'll put it out there that it wasn't as complex as the TY landfill, given the situation within a sensitive ecological coastal setting with considerable challenges faced there in Tiwai. The third one is South Hook Liquefied Gas Terminal. RPS has worked closely with South Hook LNG for over 15 years, and we're continuing with their routine groundwater monitoring and reporting, which covers the remediation, construction and operational phases of the facility. Further works have also included permitting, planning, ecology, acoustics, and also compliance monitoring and land quality. So from a comparison viewpoint, RPS is currently working through with our client to rationalise the current monitoring strategy based on a technical review of the extensive time series data that is available post redevelopment of this old refinery site, which has exhibited a legacy of historical impact on the local groundwater quality. So not only through the remediation process, but important to keep that compliance moving through post-development. Surat Gladstone Pipeline. This was a project we primarily focused on the environmental impact statement, including all the specialist studies in support of the regulatory approvals. And this was essentially for a 460-kilometre transmission pipeline from the Surat Basin to Gladstone, back to a planned LNG plant. We also prepared the environmental authority and pipeline licensing application. Next slide, Anu. So look, really closer to home, this slide provides a high-level summary of some of our regional-based remediation programs currently being carried out in this part of the world, many with comparable context and challenges, highlighting the multitude layers of requirements responding across a range of factors. So some of these factors that we're responding to here include responding to the local emotive and highly engaged community groups. And Alistair Kingston will have some interesting insights into that space. Sites with cultural significance as well. We see the wider impacts to the local economy. Also, throughout these programs are the ecological sensitive sites that we need to respond to, and really focused on that managing the future land use, having a larger lens in terms of understanding the needs of the people, the needs of the ecology, and ensuring that the site is there for future generations. Central to all this is also supporting the community, education, environment, local industry, and also creating development opportunities through commercial and community partnerships, because of course the economic side of things has to work as well. So really, if you wrap all this up, it's all about ensuring a long-term intergenerational approach. Just quickly, some of these projects, we're working on the Defence PFAS investigation and remediation program. It's probably the largest environmental program ever undertaken in Australia. We've been working with the Department of Defence here in Australia for the past 5 years. It's taken us across 28 key sites. It is an extremely emotive subject, and we've worked very closely with community stakeholder groups to ensure that we have an open and transparent process, and ensuring that we meet the needs of all of the parties involved in the program. Also related to that program, with the New Zealand Defence Force, back in 2018, we provide a lot of insight and support to the Crown in relation to some of the PFAS issues closer to home. Right, next slide. So really, at the end of the day, it's all of these comparable projects outlined in these last two slides. It's fair to say that many of the challenges we've previously faced are actually all present in the TY Point project. This is a very complex project, and I'm sure you all understand that. TY Point remediation is faced by multiple fronts when it comes to the contamination that exists across the site, each with its own unique challenges and set of requirements. This creates a multi-layered program requiring each of these critical elements to be addressed, not only in isolation, but balanced across the whole. So core to this requirement for the site is to support future generations. So that's a bit of an oversight in terms of some of those broader context issues. What we'll do now is we'll dive a little bit deeper into what this actually means on a technical front for TY Point, and I'll now introduce you to Rory Hanley to provide you with an overview of the technical complexities and the stage process and some of the critical elements at each stage of the process and what it means to you. Thank you, Anna.
That's great. Thanks, Tim, and good morning to everybody. And I suppose my biggest personal complex issue is being married to a Kiwi, and obviously following the unfortunate result for New Zealand against Ireland at the weekend. She basically got her own revenge, because I'm coming from very hot and very humid Darwin at the moment, where it's currently, what, 6:15 in the morning, a mild 30 degrees, and with fantastic humidity of about 90%. So the moral of the story is my wife is laughing last. But anyway, that's it. So moving on, anyway, yes, and again, thanks to Tim, and as Tim has mentioned, is basically each site, yes, it is unique. This site with TUE does have its complex issues. However, it's basically with these complex issues, they can be managed. It is unique because why? Yes, it's on the coast. It does have, as you can see just underneath the picture there, with trace elements of literally every element from A to Z. But certainly the main thing to note is that it's not surmountable. Everything in there can be managed, can be remediated, and we all can move forward. Again, with the site investigation, as I'm sure everyone has had a review of the reports and a look at the reports, it was broken up into different areas, with your peninsular domain, your landfill domain, smelter domain, and the groundwater. And again, as seen, there is elevated elements across the majority of the site. And in particular, there is impact with the groundwater and with aluminium fluoride, and in particular with 83% of the samples analysed are above the New Zealand drinking water standard. However, it is also noted that the majority, like the site, is still continuing to be monitored. And again, at this point, it is really, really, really important that, and critical, that the management of the impact and to understand the impact is essential. So Anu, just the next slide, please. And again, with all environmental programs, with remediation, the biggest thing is the process. And it is essential that when we're starting this journey, that we really, really, really ensure that we start off on the right foot and ensure that we go on the journey together, and that the planning is essential, which is obviously the first part of the process. And with the main things as well that we'd like to identify is with critical success factors in this planning stage, we have to ensure that the objective of the project is defined as well. We need to know what is the ultimate use at the end of the day, to make sure that we get everybody on board and start the journey together. And as like with the slide there as well, it is important that this journey, it involves everybody. It involves technical people, it involves community, it involves the government, and again, with the technical aspects and with the management, obviously there is going to be, the process will be aligned with the contaminated land management and regulations in New Zealand. And moving on from the planning, again, it's another critical factor in relation to the journey, is that there has been an awful lot of reporting done on the site. There has been an awful lot of data collected. It's important that everybody, again, sits down, understands and interrogates this data to ensure that the conceptual site model is formed, and then that additional data gaps are basically identified so it can go and move on together. And from that as well, you obviously, from the PSI, you'll come up with your sample analysis and quality plan. And again, it will ensure that the data quality objectives are met. We get robust quality assurance. And again, I'm sure people in the room will identify with this, is with these initial stages, you don't want to, again, start on the wrong foot and then go have all these monitoring programs, analysis and assessments carried out, and then all of a sudden there is an issue with another contaminant of concern. And again, it's about bringing people on the journey, and Alistair will talk to this further in relation to bringing the people on this journey and sharing the findings, obviously, of your preliminary investigation, of the planning, and again, outlining the next steps of what's going to be required. And then moving on with that, we'll have our detailed site investigation. Again, there has been an awful lot of investigations carried out on site, but one of the critical factors is that ensure that we know what's there, where it is, and where it's going. And again, it's about bringing people on that journey and communicating the findings as well, to ensure that they don't feel that anybody's being left in the dark and not understanding what's going on there. And then it's going into your remediation options and remediation action plans. And again, this is where it is sort of a bit of a bugbear as well. You want to be practical, and you want to make sure that you've got a practical, efficient remediation if required. And it's also as well in relation to the beneficial use of the site. What's it going to be used for? Because there is, again, there's visual impacts there as well on site. There's groundwater impacts, there's soil impacts. So you just want to, again, know what's there, bring the people on the journey and remediate what's required and when it's required. And again, regular updates. And then finally, on the end of the journey, it is about validation and managing. And again, one of the critical factors is independent validation as well. You want to make sure that there is an independent body there that will review reports and validate that the suitability of the site. And again, reviewing management methods. There's been numerous sites over a number of years that people, yes, it'll get validated, but however, it is ensuring that you're reviewing it with updating regulations, and again, updating community aspects as well. And you want to basically reflect on the achievements that has been done with the entire team as well, which involves the community, the technical people, the project managers, the contractors, everybody. Because in the end of the day, this is a process, this is a journey, and you want to make sure that everybody's feels a part of it. So next slide there, please, Anu. And in relation to the contaminated land management, again, it's with RPS here, we've got the two aspects as well, which again is quite unique. is we've got the environmental technical services, which I'm obviously a part of, and then you've also got the project management services, which again we can manage and detail all different complex issues and manage it from a project governance perspective and a technical perspective as well. And it's all, again, as I previously discussed in the last slide, it is going literally from cradle to grave, your program initiation, all the way through your PSI, your sampling analysis quality plan, your detailed site investigation, and to all the, again, important financial areas as well, which is the procurement and delivery and the management and remediation, and particularly also finding. Some people don't like the technical side, other people like the project management. So it's good to have, like, dare you say, two sides of the coin, really, where you've got the people can like the technical people can concentrate on the technical aspects, and other people can concentrate on the program management and the project governance. And in relation to that, it's also a really good opportunity as well to bring on for employees if they go and say, oh, look at I don't particularly want to be a technical guru. I prefer to look at the dollars and cents, which I personally prefer to be out dabbling in some contamination and smelling hydrocarbons in the morning. But yeah, it's basically not particularly for me, but we've definitely got the people in the background that can do that. But again, I suppose the main thing about the entire program and the entire progress of contaminated land management and remediation, it is ensuring that we carry out really good engagement, bringing those people on the journey, and just identifying the issues. That's it. And so moving on, I will hand over to Alistair. Thanks, Dean.
Thank you, Rory. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I'm not married to a New Zealander. I'm just putting it out there. I'm probably the only person in the room. Yeah, so thank you for the opportunity to share with you some of our learnings that we've gained from engaging with communities and stakeholders on contamination projects. Hopefully I can give you some insights and some things that you can consider as a group looking to play a part in shaping the future of TY Point and your community, and share some perspectives gained from working with project proponents and government agencies. Look, even when we're working for government or a project proponent, my people as an engagement practitioners, we always need to have the community, their needs, their interests and drivers front of mind. We need to engage your perspectives, understand your perspectives, your concerns and needs to make sure that we can engage effectively with you, that you're getting the information you need and are participating in the project process. Look, from a community I'm telling you to suck eggs here, but from a community perspective, contamination is a really complex issue. It's often highly technical. There's a large number of stakeholders with varying interests and also varying levels of impact. Some people may be highly impacted and very interested, others less so and less interested, and some are completely disinterested. There's also the challenge of perceived risk, so particularly when it comes to contamination with potential health risks attached to it. So perception very much equals reality. So the project owner or proponent needs to make sure that the community and stakeholders are equipped with the facts that you need to inform decisions and provide informed comment rather than perceptions or a perceived understanding of the issue. And that perceived risk will move up and down depending on the stakeholder and their connection with land or country, and taking an evidence-based approach is critical, focusing on the facts and the actual situation, and where necessary, doing a bit of myth-busting while being very sensitive and attuned to the community members or stakeholders' concerns or position. So for me, there's 4 key tips I'd give you, things that a community should expect and look to as part of a contamination engagement program. So how you should expect to be engaged. So the first thing is very much around transparency. The community has a right to be kept informed, as do stakeholders within government. That means you need to be provided with information and updates regularly, or have information shared as it comes to hand. It means the sharing of findings, good or bad, and being transparent about what you've found, where it is, how much there is, etc., so that you can make informed decision and participate fully in any engagement program. As a community, you should always feel that your well-being and the well-being of your environment is being considered. If there are exposure pathways to humans or the environment from the contamination sources, then that needs to be clearly communicated to you, along with the steps that's being taken to break those pathways to ensure your well-being and that of the environment. There also needs to be very much transparency around the approach being taken. Sometimes, as you know, community members may have a view on what needs to be done, but the science is perhaps telling a different story. So that's why it's important to clearly communicate the approach being taken and why it's being taken. I suppose, for example, sometimes we see community members have aspirations that all of the contamination needs to be removed from a location, but the science says, well, actually, sometimes it's safer to leave it there or to manage it, because removing it could cause greater impacts to the people or the environment. So where there are situations like that, that needs to be clearly communicated so there's a shared understanding of the situation. The last thing on transparency is there should be transparency on where the information is coming from that's being used to inform decision making. So if external experts have been engaged to provide advice, then you should be told who those experts are and where the advice is coming from. The second thing is having progressive conversations. So with investigation programs, as Rory mentioned before, you need to be upfront and honest with the community and stakeholders about what you do know, but also what you don't know. It's actually okay not to have all the answers at the start, and that's the function of the investigation program, to work out what you don't know, so you know what's there and you can have a plan going forward. So as you go through the investigation program, more and more information will become available. And as you get more information, you can have a progressive conversation with the community, between the community and the project. So you can build on previous conversations that have been had and have deeper conversations. The results of each round of work or investigation, the findings, etc., should be shared, so you can have that iterative conversation about the current state and provide informed comment or feedback, or just have a good understanding of what's coming next. It's also really, really important for the interactions and conversations that you have with each other between the project and community to be respectful. That can get you a lot of traction. So more than raised voices or protests, considered respectful conversations get you a really long way. And from an engagement practitioner's perspective, that's sort of having that productive and meaningful dialogue is really, really, really important. The third thing that I think is really important is creating context. Creating context is providing the information and the key things that you need to expect. It's also making sure that you as a community are prepared, equipped, and enabled to participate in the engagement process. It's about making sure there's a clear understanding of the situation, the work that's been done or needs to be done to successfully manage the issue or impacts. So not all of us are scientists, I'm certainly not. And with contamination, there's a lot of highly technical terms used. So it's really important that the community and stakeholders are provided with information they need in an accessible way. It's certainly not about dumbing things down. It's not about not communicating some things. It's about using plain English, using visual communications tools like information graphics, but also making sure that you're being checked in with to make sure that the information you're provided or being provided is accessible, understandable, and is giving you the understanding that you need of the situation. And if it's not, then the project or the proponent needs to refine its approach to make sure that the information is being provided in an appropriate way. As such, I'd really encourage you to ask questions. Questions are good, just to make sure that you have the level of detail that you need, the understanding that you need to be across the situation, to feel comfortable and to understand what's going on and why. And just flagging, sometimes with contamination, there does need to be an aspect of educational myth busting. So, for example, some of the work that I've done with an airport here in Queensland has been about myth busting the perceived health impact. So, you know, the only way that nearby community members could potentially be exposed to this particular source of contamination was by eating crops grown in airport soil or drinking water off airport land, none of which were happening. So just being really clear that this is the current state of the contamination. Here are the potential pathways to get to people, and actually it can't get to you. So just being really clear about what the actual situation is. Finally, the last thing is starting with the end in mind. This is really important. Because it's important to identify early the part that you want to play, what you want to get out of the engagement program or the project as community members. This is important for you, but it's also important for whoever's delivering the engagement program. It's about working out what you want and having clear, open and honest conversations about what getting to your ideal future state looks like. It's important to recognise that you might have similar goals to the project or the proponent, but see different ways of getting there. As such, it's really important to know what you want and be able to have the conversations about it clearly. That way, if both parties in the conversation are being clear about what they want and having the right conversations, that you're more likely to have a productive, open and trusting working relationship and more likely to achieve what you need to achieve. This is an opportunity for you as a community or a group of communities, groups before engaging with the project to get aligned. This gives you power. Very often we see a number of community groups participating in engagement processes all coming from a slightly different or conflicting angle, which makes it really quite challenging for a project to engage with the community and can present barriers to achieving productive results. So as such, a key piece of advice I'd have you would be to get internal alignment early within your group and other aligned interested groups. This way you can present a united and consensus voice and means that you can really have an effective voice and seat at the table. Next slide, please. I've only got 2 slides. So the next one, there's a lot on here, but I'm not going to go through all of it. But really, what I wanted to leave you with was a bit of a thought starter as a community about how you'd like to participate or be involved in the engagement process. So there's 2 diagrams which you consider moving forward to inform your thinking about how you'd like to operate. So the first one on the left is the IAP2 community engagement. So IAP2 is the International Association of Public Participation, the peak body for engagement practitioners. This model is used to identify the part that various groups can play in the engagement process. So who leads the engagement process and who acts and who participates in it. So there are 4 different models, 2 where the community leads the process and 2 where the organisation leads. And then there's 1 where you work together with shared leadership and action. So for you as a community, it's probably quite important to think at this stage about and discuss the part that you'd like to play in the engagement and in the process in shaping the future, what is decided and done. You know, for example, do you want to play a leading role in shaping the engagement program, or are you more comfortable being a participant? Leading can take the form of advocacy, identifying what you want, clearly stating it and supporting the organisation to deliver it. Or the organisation or project could take the lead and you're the participant involved and consulted. There's the shared leadership role where both the community and the project participate and contribute to the decisions, but also take responsibility for the actions and outcomes. So these models are just thought starters, and what you do doesn't need to fit into one of these boxes. But I just wanted to share with you some ideas or starting points for which you can discuss and align on how you might like to participate going forward. This diagram over on the right is intended to be another discussion starter for how deeply you'd like to be involved in the final solution or product. So as engagement practitioners, we use the IAP2 spectrum of engagement to help us design and deliver appropriate engagement programs. And as a community, it's probably important for you to be aware of the potential models of engagement which can be employed, so to inform your thinking as to how you'd like to be involved. So on the spectrum, and apologies if you're familiar with this, sort of moving left to right, there's an increasing impact of decision or issue and the deepening or the deeper levels of engagement or involvement the community have in shaping the outcome or solution. On the left is inform, where you're provided with balanced and objective information and you're kept informed as to what's going on. It's a one-way flow of information. On the far right is empower, where the community is empowered to make decisions about, and the project proponent does what you want them to do. So being upfront, most engagement actually happens between the inform and involve parts of the spectrum. There are sort of collaborate and empower engagements, but they're less frequent. So, you know, this is particularly the case where there's a project proponent and the community as a stakeholder. It's highly unlikely to have empower there. However, you know, it's not unheard of. I know there was a project on the North Island a few years ago where the Department of Environment empowered a local community to decide how a river catchment was going to be managed into the future. So it's absolutely not unheard of. It's also important to note that it's not binary on the spectrum where a project operates. So at times it might be informed, providing information. Other times it could be consult, collaborate or involve, where there are opportunities to co-design solutions or for the community to be involved in options analysis. So to, you know, what option do you feel most comfortable with from your perspective in connection to country, you know, that you're most comfortable with. So as a community, I'd suggest you have a think about sort of what part you'd like to play in the decision-making process and look for ways of securing that level of involvement. If you're looking to collaborate on solutions, I'd suggest setting up a reference group that represents all the key stakeholder groups. It means you can have a direct line to the project, but also that the project has a direct line to you where they can test feedback or ask for, test solutions or ask for feedback. So in closing, to summarise, remember that you should have transparency, progressive conversations to be provided with context and information, and that you should start with the end in mind. And as a community, I'd suggest you should very much align on what you want, how you want to be involved, and present that united face and unified voice to have that seat at the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Alistair. Thank you very much. So that concludes the presentation that we had prepared. I'm now going to just hand over to you. And of course, if you have any question, please bring them in now. We will obviously be available to answer any question later on if you want to pass them on. But I think we have a bit of time for a conversation, haven't we?
Yes, we do. So any questions?
Kia ora koutou. Thank you very much for your presentation. I've just got a real quick question. I'm just confused about the role of RPS in this situation with TY. I know we've got the GHD reports that were in conjunction with NZAS, but I'd like to know who the client is of RPS in this this role. So thanks.
Can I just take that one because it's probably something I should have told you at the very beginning. We are not involved. That's it. Full stop. We don't have a client. We're just here because we've been invited to share our insights on similar processes. At this stage, we don't, and therefore we are totally open to questions from any sides. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, okay, well that puts a different perspective on it. I thought this project was already underway and you were working with Rio Tinto to actually start the process, but obviously it's a lot earlier than that. But my thoughts are along the lines that you've noted a lot of atomic periodic table elements there, and I am aware of international remediation where you can actually take the soil, take all those elements out of it and put good soil back. And I guess the next part of my question is, you're saying you've got a long-term view and what will the eventual use of the site be. How much consideration needs to be given to the fact that we're almost at the sea level, and with global warming and climate change and all those issues confronting us, which probably means far more extreme weather events, that this site should really be remediated to go back into nature and just forget about trying to carry on with any industrial use?
Yeah.
Maybe Tim, do you want to answer that one, or Rory, one of you?
Yeah, look, I think there's a comment from all of us really around that. That's a very valid question you raise. It raises quite a few elements there, but if I could just talk to the future land use and rising sea levels and allowing the site to regenerate and then go back into nature. The key consideration here is an agreed pathway for the future direction of the site. Now, I say that as if that's just a simple thing to do. It's extremely complex when you've got such a broad range of stakeholders involved. You've obviously got an industrial site. You've got some serious kit out the back in terms of energy production. There's a lot of different ways this site could go. It could be regenerated for alternate energy use, green hydrogen, gas as an example, and provide jobs to the local community, driving the local economy and providing an outcome. It could be centred around a more ecologically balanced solution, given the significant ecology located around the site. But I guess I raise all of this as these are the considerations that really need to be mapped out. To Alistair's point around the plan, what is the plan? And I guess that's a big part around the stakeholder engagement, is collectively coming together and agreeing on the plan. Now, not all parties associated with stakeholder group will see their preferred view come to light. But I guess it's a balanced approach. It's a very difficult process, but communication and engagement is centre to all of that. And maybe Rory, if you answer the technical question around the elements.
Yeah, for sure. Like there is definitely, obviously, detection of various elements there. Obviously, aluminium, fluorine, sulfate in the groundwater, etc. And again, it's a very, very valid point in relation to climate change and the impacts that it's going to have. And to basically answer the question, it's continued monitoring. They are doing monitoring currently on site, and then it is developing the plan and starting the process for this future management and ongoing possible remediation in relation to the future use of the site. I know you're saying in relation to returning it back to recreational use and using it from a community perspective, 100% basically agree. And in relation to, it's just the ongoing management, collecting the data and understanding again what the data is saying to it, and communicating it to the community groups as well in a format that everybody understands.
Thank you. I just want to thank RPS for their presentation. I'm Jen Nolan, I'm the Director of External Relations for Rio Tinto, and we completely agree. We think transparency, collaboration and engagement is the pathway to a good process. We have not had any communication from RPS ourselves, but I see that you've made good use of our detailed site investigation report, which we released publicly for everyone to see. And we're really happy to give anyone in this group a presentation on our closure process, and you'll see that it's very similar to the process that RPS have outlined here. I guess one of the problems we're all wrestling with is a degree of uncertainty, and we're wrestling with that at TY2, our team, and we'd like to, I think when you apply for a job in a government department, one of the things they ask you is how can you handle ambiguity? And it's a difficult thing, and that is the process we're in at the moment. We're dealing with ambiguity, and I guess I'm asking for a bit of patience, but I'm also asking for this community to keep talking to us, because we very, very much want to talk to you. And again, I thank RPS and couldn't agree more. A good process is based on collaboration, it's based on engagement, and it's based on transparency, and that's what we're committed to. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Great question.
Kia ora.
Hello everyone, my name is Emma Moran, and just as some context, I wrote the rules for the region on land contamination a few years ago. It's quite interesting listening to everybody talk about engagement. One of the several points that sort of have come up in listening to all those speakers, and one of them is this distinction that seems to be drawn between the community and stakeholders. Everyone has a stake in what's going to happen. We're all stakeholders, and I think it's a fundamental mistake from the beginning to sort of somehow think that there's two sort of different positions or situations. The other thing is that in terms of language, if you're going to talk to people, you need to talk in English or Maori. You can't talk about insights and learnings and moving forward and using that sort of jargon. You've actually got to make it accessible to people. And the other thing is that I know a reasonable amount about this region, and I've done a lot of sort of science and economic work in the past, and my sort of, I can't get past the idea that the only thing that is actually going to happen to the site in the future is it's going underwater.
Thank you for your comments. Very, very appropriate. I personally struggle as well with this distinction between community and stakeholder, and I think we all totally agree that the first step probably to any decent engagement is to find our joint voice and find a way for everyone to actually speak the same language. I think Alistair's point earlier in his presentation that really marked me, Alistair, was this idea that perception is reality, and indeed, how do you get to a shared perception of the situation if you don't speak the same language and don't share the same ideas? So that's probably my feeling on that first point. Now we have not done any detailed investigation or detailed analysis of the investigation reports that are publicly available, and we know nothing else than what is publicly available. So it's not probably appropriate for us RPS to comment on any detail there. If there is one thing that comes to my mind is that the challenge of sea level rise and generally the impact of environmental patterns changing is something that our clients share, and that we obviously the 5,600 RPS employees we share, because we are also the community and the stakeholders, or whichever way we call ourselves. So it's very valid, and I can only share your concern. Yes. Is there any special question that you would like one of the three specialists here to answer on that? Guys, is there any further comments you would like to make?
I think we've got a couple of more questions and comments. Thank you.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
One question, what happens to all the material that you remove from the site? How do you process that? How do you clean it, or how do you dispose of it?
So maybe, Rory, do you want to tell us what various things you have seen on various sites? I mean, I suppose it goes from taking it away and I suppose paying someone else to keep it for you, down to actually cleaning it and bringing it back. But I'll let you detail that.
Yeah, like again, I can obviously only talk to basically similar projects and experiences that I've had over the years around the globe, and particularly with the identified elements and the concentrations that I've seen in these publicly available reports. There is various methods of remediation from, as you've said, remove the soil and go and place it elsewhere, or else there's also other remedial techniques such as soil washing, which is in the end, which is literally as it says, is you excavate material and you put it through a washing plant, and then that both treats the soils plus obviously all the associated water associated with it. And then there is other methods as well, such as thermal treatment. So there's in situ treatment, and there's also in relation to like stabilization methods. If there is concerns with the contamination migrating away, there is elements and remediation techniques that you can put into the soil and ensure that the elements are not migrating away from the site or causing issues.
Yeah, thanks, Rory. I suppose one interesting point in what you've just explained is that each of those solutions obviously needs to be tailored to what the problem is, but also, as we talked about, what it is that the community wants to achieve, and according to what timeline, I presume. And therefore, understanding that you might decide on a solution for a period of time, but you might have to review this. Hence, I suppose, your point in the process that you developed, which was to actually monitor what has been achieved and continue to have a look at it to make sure that it's working well. Sorry, sir, I think you were about to ask another question or maybe clarify something?
I was just going to say thank you.
Well, thank you to you then.
Thank you.
Kia ora koutou, I'm Wilma Faulkner, I'm the General Manager Strategy, Planning and Engagement from Environment Southland. We're the Regional Council here and the regulatory body, along with our colleagues at the Invercargill City Council, who I can't see today, but, oh sorry, I can see the Mayor, but not my colleagues from the offices. Just so that those of you in the room who are not aware of this do know that government has funded Environment Southland and the Invercargill City Council jointly to engage in a detailed examination of the site at TY, and we've been working cooperatively with New Zealand Aluminium Smelters on that project. They've shared with us all of the information that they've shared publicly with you, and all of the information that we have on the site is available on our website, and the program of work and how we're approaching it is also being communicated and updated as that advances. So you're very welcome to go there and see all of that. And just so that you're aware, this program is actually being overseen by a joint oversight group, and that oversight group is ourselves and Invercargill City Council. It is also Te Runanga o Awaroa's remediation project team, and their kai whakahaere is on our oversight group. Te Runanga o Ngāi Tahu's office in Christchurch has also got their General Manager Strategy and influence on that oversight group. The Department of Conservation is joining that oversight group, as has no and heritage responsibilities legislatively, and also as a neighbouring landowner. And the Ministry for the Environment, who's also here today, Sean Lewis, is on our oversight group. So we've been working on this project now for many months, having received funding from central government for it at the beginning of the year. So that's ongoing, that information is ongoing and available, and will be available through, on our website, but also will be available through the various stakeholders back to their groups as well. Thank you.
Thank you. That sounds like a strong governance model. Interesting point you make about data. As we said, you know, that data is very important, data ownership. But we were talking as well about this conceptual site model. I think a great way to achieve transparency in this day and age is to actually maybe find a way to bring together all the data that has ever been collected, to provide that transparency to anyone that wants to achieve it. But anyway, let's go ahead. Sir, you have a question?
Yeah, I have got a question.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, I have got a question actually. There's a whole cultural content out on this wall here about the research and that we've done. And when we were doing a lot of the research, we've also IOA'd for a lot of material, and we've got a lot of material on what needs to be done here. And some of us are monitoring the regulators very seriously, and there will be a statement that will be coming in due course, but we're just monitoring that really, really carefully from the Invercargill City Council and also Environmental Southland and Rio's information.
Ka pai, one more question. We've got time for one more. There we go. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, just a quick question for RPS. When you look at a site like this, and it's a pretty extensive site, and the aluminium smelter is still operational and will be for another few years yet, by the sound of it, what sort of timeline do you find in other overseas projects between when they can vacate a site and when you can actually bring a site back to normality where you can use it for something else? I'd imagine that timeline could be quite extensive, well into excess of 10 years or more.
Totally depends. I've worked on a similar chemical site in the northeast of UK where we'd demolished and remediated some heavily contaminated material with hydrocarbons, metals, and it was all done and dusted in 6 months. And that was basically from It was a year in relation to the closure plan from the team to then 6 months in relation to the demolition and remediation team coming in. And again, each site, as we said at the start, is unique, and everything can be complex as well. So it totally depends on the remediation technique as well. And again, bring the journey with the community, with the clients, with the consultants, with all the team on how to do it efficiently and appropriately for the community and the clients. So yeah, so timelines can vary quite significantly.
Kapai, we've got one last statement here.
Kia ora. Welcome to all the visitors to the city. I was wondering if the deal is patched up and they decide that we can go ahead and sign another contract and keep the smelter going, one of the unknowns. Is there value in that work that's been achieved, or do you go back to square one and have to start again with the whole process? I don't know who that's addressed to.
I am not sure either. So certainly unable to look into the crystal ball. We obviously have no insight on what will happen. I suppose my general comment to your question, sir, would be that the data that's been collected, the work that has been done to actually engage the community around these problems will never be wasted, because effectively you are defining what you want to achieve together for the future. Having said that, of course, the detail of the various engagements and various work that is being done today is not on me to comment on.
They don't know.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Thanks.
Nō reira e te ui e te whānau kia koutou ngā kai kōrero e mihi tēnei kia koutou katoa. Thank you very much for your insight. We'll let you know if you got the job.
So we're around. We don't necessarily need the job, but we are very, very pleased to have been with you today. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you for your time. Lovely to be with you today. Bye-bye.
We're going to have morning tea now, so enjoy whatever kai you're going to have. Ka whai?
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is that time, morning tea. I'm sure there's a lot of discussion that will be had. After morning tea, or actually during morning tea, we're going to section off the room. So the bad guys on that side, the good guys on this side. We'll work it out along the way. But please enjoy your, are they scones? Muffins? Scones. Oh, sorry. I grew up in Tuatapere, so it was scones back in those days. Forgive me. So we'll just do a quick karakia. Whakapainga tēnei kai e oranga mo mātou tinana, ko koe hoki te rangatira tangata ka hame te gloria, ake, amene. Ka pai, enjoy. Sorry, food and need? Yeah. I say food and fibre will be at the back of the room, green energy in the front of the room. There we go. Kia ora whānau.
We have to create a plan. So there are some challenges for us. This graphic here, I just want to point out generation, transmission, and the markets. Our electricity markets, and I likewise am not an expert in electricity, but something is fundamentally broken. If you look at this graphic here, this was 3 days ago, the spot price of electricity. So South Island, Te Waipunamu, 3 cents. North Island, up the top there, $173 as a spot price. So one of the things we heard loud and clear is keep the power in Murihiku and Southland, and a fundamental principle is that. But what I want to present to you, it's not an either or. What we need to do when we're acting, and Tātipini you heard yesterday is pretty clear. We have to act for all New Zealanders and in the national interest. And what we know is Murihiku is the engine room for this green energy future. So part of this process, which I'll come to, that we're going to contribute to is how do we work on that as well. So our view around green energy, need more generation. We know that if we want to do green energy, you need lots more power. And we know it all flows from water and the opportunity that are abundant here. We also need to fix transmission, because otherwise our mates in the North Island are going to keep facing this issue, and politicians are always going to be looking to where they get voted in. Reno's not in the room, is he? No. But the reality is politicians will look where the people are, and the people are north. So we do have to look at transmission, and then something has to be done around the markets. So Murihiku, Tiri and Tātipini have been approached by the Electricity Authority, and we have been asked to provide some comments and feedback on what needs to be done. And I'm hoping today you're going to contribute to some of that kōrero, because we kind of want to get this input so that we bring forward the voice of this community, iwi, rangatahi, leaders, all together about what we're going to do. What we're interested in as a project is that, creating an ecosystem. It's new. Kiwis struggle with change. Everyone struggles with change, and it's going to be difficult. What we've found is that there's a lot of groups out there who say, come with us and join our plan. And Tātipini talked yesterday about not wanting Ngāi Tahu to be a kawhaiwhai on the page of someone else's executive summary, and we don't want that from a Murihiku regeneration perspective, but neither do we want Murihiku Regen to control everything, because actually we don't have all the answers. And we saw with the session before on Tiwai, we're all going to have to work together on it. So fundamentally in this ecosystem, we're not just interested in a green energy project, although that's important. What we're interested in is creating the ecosystem for the future and being part of it. So leadership's going to be important. We're lucky enough, government have asked Murihiku Regeneration to lead a work stream around clean energy and help with input from the community and all of the partners, not stakeholders, figure out what needs to be done. And we'd been told by Megan Woods yesterday, you had a checkbook ready, that she will fund some of that. So we are going to be calling on you to kind of identify what are some of the projects that need to be done, what are the priorities, because there's going to be less money than there is projects to be done. So it's going to need good leadership, and we're going to have to find a way to stop competing interests, because there's lots of them out there. We've struck it ourselves with the generators and others. We're in this process with Meridian and Contact, where they've started a process around a production project, so have we. There's a bit of a Mexican standoff at the moment about whose project goes forward. Ideally, we just want one project that's good for New Zealand, that works, or maybe a couple that gives us a long-term future. Policy settings need to change. I'll very quickly talk about that in a minute. I'm a creature of Wellington a little bit, and unless we get the bureaucrats and the politicians and the policy people who prepare it behind us for Murihiku, we're going to be waiting in the queue 5 years. And the challenge is, Murihiku, 3% of the population. We'll lose that voice. So we want to make sure in the work that we're doing that your voice is heard, everybody's voice. I was really captured by rangatahi yesterday, and a need to make sure that the younger ones, their voices are really heard loud and clear. And the Murihiku approach is a 60-plus year approach, and we want to make sure it's for the long term. Production. we need to create some hydrogen. We've got a cool hydrogen car out there that's got no more hydrogen, so it can't go anywhere. So we need production. We need to find a way to avoid competing interests. I know there's a commercial lens for some people, but that's not what's driving us. We want something that's going to work. Of course, we want to make sure iwi sit at the heart of it, and so they should. But we are going to need to have a production project, and we want to make sure all of you who have an interest in it have input, so that it's good for Southland, it's good for New Zealand, it's good for my children who are Ngāi Tahu, and that actually we all benefit. So I think production is key. We know we need to do it, and we know we need to start thinking about it. Now, hydrogen's real, it's not going to go away. Yes, we could have dilithium crystals or nuclear fusion in the future, but the reality is that's the thing that we've got now. Distribution, so we're very keen. You can't just produce it. People need to see it. They need to see it driving around. It needs to be in their faces. And one of the things we learnt, I did a bit of work in the Canterbury earthquakes for 4 years. You've got to win the hearts and minds, and it's what we need to do here. We need to make sure we've got a social licence, so that's key. Applications, there's a lot of cool stuff out there, a lot of really amazing people. We want to connect up the dots. We want to make sure that Southland and South Island and New Zealand isn't on the end of some global distribution process. They just received technology from somebody else. So we need to make sure the big, the medium and the smalls are allowed for. And offtake and that, creating the social licence. How do we do that? There's some people who want to use it if they know it's going to come. Some want to bring stuff in so that they can position themselves for the future. Cool, I think that's really good. What we want to do though is get the conditions right over the next 3 years as Rio decide what they are going to do in their future. We can't wait for Rio. And Jen, it was really great what you said before as well, but we can't wait. It's one of the known unknowns for us. So certainty, we've decided that around certainty, green energy is the future, and it's about getting that coalition of the willing. Can't read this, but I'll send it to you. So we've got, that's deliberate. So we've got a green energy work stream which was set up in our group. It's led by Terry Nicholas, reporting to our upoko. We've got Mike Pohio on that. He is the executive chair of Ngāi Tahu Holdings. Arahia Bennett is the CEO of Ngāi Tahu. Michael Stevens, who so eloquently spoke yesterday, is on our group. Albert Brantley, who's here with us today, and David Stock. So we've got a group of individuals, and their role is to pull together a compelling project that can engage with this region and also with government and drive a future. So that's that project team. We're now kind of in a position where we can start sharing and opening it up. And what we heard from the last session, good engagement, bring the people along, and transparency. The other area which I just want to talk about here is the Crown Just Transitions process. So we've been working closely with government, and hats off to Megan Woods. She's been very open about ensuring iwi, workers, unions, the community can be engaged in this process. So we are lucky enough to have been asked to lead the clean energy work stream, and this is what we have to do. So we have appointed an independent chair. Stand up, Eric. Is Eric here? Eric Roy? No, he's not. Yeah, okay, so Eric next door. So Eric Roy is going to be the independent chair of our working group. We are going to then call for nominations for people to be on that working group. Reality is we want a tightish group, 8 or 9, who's going to help lead and bring together all of the different feedback from the community and interest groups and do it in partnership. We'll have a terms of reference ready to share in January, probably sooner, and based on feedback we get today. So we want to get a view of what's important and what's not. We'll have the working group in place by February, and it's a group that's not for passengers. Get on the bus, go and do some stuff, come up with a plan, present it back, and along the way we want to report back to all of you and keep you informed. And it's not going to be perfect, But what we hope to do is answer some of the known unknowns. Tiwai is one of those, and John, we've been sort of talking with Jen about getting some certainty around what Rio wants to do. Very interested to see how around local government, how what priorities come out of local government as well, and also the voice of iwi and business. We then have to prepare an outline working program that could go to government for funding, and we're going to do that by August next year. And if we believe the politicians, and of course we have to, they're telling us that in budget 23, so that's in May, June 2023, they will allocate some funding based on priorities for this region around clean energy. And the clean energy, we're in a bit of a discussion about what clean energy is, and I'll be interested if that's a question for you as well. My view, we're looking at clean energy Tiwai, because that's a key unknown for us. What do we do with the site? What can it do? Decarbonisation, really important as well. How do we take advantage of the natural opportunities that this region provides, and how can we protect it? And green energy, we see as the other one. And if there's anything else you think we need to look at in there as well, we'll do that. One of the things we're very interested in looking at, and I'll be interested in your feedback, is creating a Murihiku renewable energy zone. One of the challenges, having spent a lot of years in Wellington, is dealing with the policy wonks who will move at their own process, and unless we capture those policy wonks and we get the ability to call this a pilot or a demonstration area, they're going to tie us up in red tape and nothing will happen. So what we want to do, and I talked with Megan Woods about this yesterday, is have one of these. Australians have them, and basically it says Murihiku can get on and do some stuff because of the uncertainty around Tiwai. Iwi need to have some certainty around their future, and we're going to go and do some stuff. And we may not get it all right, but we're going to get it as right as we can. We're just going to get on with it. And she's quite open to that. I say this here, and we'll sort of see if we can hold it to it. But having that policy support so that we don't have to wait for government departments in Wellington is really important. And then we can offer this up for others. And this is kind of part of our baby vision. I mean, you've seen all of this before. I took an idea of this to Terry. Terry and I developed it and took it to Tepini and Michael. It's a no-brainer. The Murihiku Renewable Energy Zone, Clean Energy Zone, Green, whatever. It's a thing which uses the abundance of power that exists with Matapori, add lots of wind and other things to it, and there are consequences for adding wind, but we do that. We can then create a production project, a big one. It has to be big enough. We also want some small ones to make sure that all around the region we have distributed energy. So small communities, a marae, everywhere can actually have energy self-sufficiency, and we need to make sure we have all of that. We want to use it inside New Zealand, and we want to export it at some stage when it's right. We want to make sure it's big enough that other parts of Te Waipunamu and New Zealand have the confidence to do it as well, because it's lonely out there. They've got these great little projects, and we need to find a way to connect up the dots. So that's kind of what we want to do, and we want your help, want your ideas, and figure out what we need to do next. We don't want to just do it to you. And there is no master plan, but we're working on getting into a position where Murihiku, iwi are central to the opportunity, so we're not left out. Right. Here are some questions that I have for you. And what I'd like to do, if this is okay, is to start talking, thinking, and writing up. If you've got some points, because we want to capture these and take them away, put them into the terms of reference. We want to reflect them back to you again to make sure we've got them right and open the conversation up. So, 4 questions. What I would like to do is to get these 2 tables here. You can sit at your tables, do your stuff, but just write up some points, and then we're just going to get at the end of the 20 minutes, or when I call time, somebody to stand up and And this group, and here these three tables, same. And these two here. As well. And you've got the right one.
So Pound is the electricity distribution network for the, so we manage across the south region. There's a number of different distribution leader. So we do distribution, so we do power lines. So there's different number of different owners. So Pound is a little bit unique in the country. There are 29 what are called electricity distribution businesses. Pounding oversees 3 of them, so it's kind of a back office. So there's electricity on the Cargill, which is the Cargill network itself. It's owned essentially by the council. There is the Power Company Limited, which is effectively community owned, and then there is Otago joint venture, which is basically owned by those 2 businesses. Using we're not going to break it down. We're not going to change that today. So how do you get the benefits of both? Because you can't just stand up and go, we're not having it this way, we're just having it this way. Because it's structures. Cats in Wellington are running beautifully to keep our whole society running. So I think we need to be realistic.
Well, it's about learning from everybody else about how they do it, because I was listening to the but it's really interesting, and I think maybe it's but anyway, it's actually what I thought they were really good and really interesting. So this is how people are still doing it, but I think that our engagement has to be
Maybe people in Southland do view the same way, maybe not, but that's actually not much value in the bigger picture if we don't articulate that.
Kia ora, everybody. If we could just start rounding up the conversations. And James, we'll start with you when you're ready. Hi, James. Ready when you are. All right, everybody.
I could have done with another 5 minutes, Mike, but that's all right.
Well,
you keep me on my toes,
mate. We've got to get on with it. This is all about action.
Yeah. Okay. For the first question about the key opportunities, we've got a long list of those, but they were sort of ultimately underpinned by a number of sort of principles we thought was really key to sort of highlight, and they were sort of whatever we come up with has to be Murihiku centric. It has to be multiple things. We don't just want to focus on one particular opportunity. And we also want to make that a template that we can apply to other regions. And that would be all supported by an ongoing education program so we can keep developing skills. And so the particular items we had, obviously PV was one of them, a greater utilisation and use of fresh water, coal substitution, and also coming up with a long game, thinking about transport as well. So that was the opportunity. Anything else to add on that? In terms of the challenges we saw, yeah, there was a few, but not a massive amount. I think one of them was the political landscape and how we fit in with Wellington, and just avoiding that risk of a change of government and new sort of policies. And ultimately, the other challenge we have, there is a lot of uncertainty about the future of NZAS. If we can resolve that, things become a lot clearer and it's far less of a challenge. Another one's alignment, which I think we'll pick up in 3 as well, but just ensuring that we have an alignment between all community groups as well as sort of education, or supported by education. And ecology as well, whether or not things are changing there that we need to be more across. In terms of priorities, the first one was the confirmation of NZAS's position. We need to sort of minimise that uncertainty and give us a bit more focus. And whatever we do, it has to be resilient and has to be a durable solution long term, and ideally would be developing something in parallel to NZAS's future. And if they do decide to stay, they'll stay on our terms. It won't be what they want, and I think it has to be quite a fundamentally different arrangement. The other priority is identifying key transferable skills for the current workforce so we can make a seamless transition from one industry to another. And then ultimately, whatever we do, getting a clearer understanding of what it's actually going back into the community in terms of value and how we can sort of add to that. In terms of the last point around the community connection, ultimately it's about probably briefing the community and having a really clear and strong line of communication with a sort of a feedback process as well. So they were the 4 questions we had. Anything else to add? My notes taking wasn't great.
Great. Sam.
Tēnā tātou katoa. From our group, in terms of opportunities, there was a comment that a lot of the green energy future is based on China and their industry and their demand, so wanting to keep a line of sight on movements there. Green aluminium may well be part of the future was a comment, and so a discussion around the plus of a functioning smelter and green energy was put on the table. Quite a lot of discussion around looking at what the opportunities will be for our people and their energy costs, and some discussion around decentralised energy as well as some of the large-scale projects that we're talking about here. And so support and education for communities both around that generation side of it, but also reducing demand and analysing that end-to-end system. There was some good discussion around the chance for this initiative to come from a very Māori focus on what intergenerational success looks like, and we might have had different drivers making decisions in the past around economic and other factors, but really affirming what that sort of long-term analysis will be and how we weigh up options in the future based on that. In terms of challenges, we discussed the transmission pricing system, which you've touched on already as a key one in terms of the nationwide picture, and understanding also the whole energy landscape beyond electricity and the context within which these discussions will be occurring. The consenting framework was problematic, was discussed, but also a note around some significant huge offshore wind potential, which needs to be part of the mix. And some discussion around what the intervention will be that, in terms of your cycle there, Mike, what will be the kickstart to really get this going. In terms of priorities and affirmation really around long-term planning, systems thinking, mapping, making sure that any decisions are made are solid ones that deliver long-term benefits for the future, both for communities, but also making sure their economic models are viable to provide certainty in terms of jobs and employment. And some good discussion around education for communities, reinforcing that earlier point really around managing their own energy demand. For community, we talked about the education and capability component of this, an affirmation for rangatahi to be engaged and leading on designing their future around this, effective and regular communication, a comment that will get good community involvement where they see benefits. So when it's well known and socialised, then that will naturally draw people in. And in terms of that, had some good discussion around capturing hearts and minds, with family stories involved in this as part of the narrative, and some interactive modelling and storytelling at sort of key sites around the community to demonstrate what some of the potential might be.
Good.
Great.
Sally.
I'll walk the mic over here.
Okay, so we didn't structure ours quite so closely to this, but starting off with smelter versus hydrogen, the feeling was it's an and, that green aluminium also has its place potentially. We also talked about potential new biofuels that could be grown as part of a bigger discussion around milk powder factories, for example, currently looking to change to wood chips versus being electrified, which I think we're all agreed that electrification is the first choice, rather than having to store that electricity in any other form. It's best to use that directly if possible. But one of the challenges there is that their, if I've got this correct, grid investment case fails in terms of getting upgrades to infrastructure, because they use a lot of electricity and currently they can't just plug in and do that. And so that kind of led us on to regulatory issues, and that the potential of the Murihiku Regeneration Corridor to be an exemplar for perhaps revisions to the RMA, perhaps a special planning zone or something where it was somewhat easier to move through the consenting process to, for instance, the other key point was that we need more electricity. Everybody seemed to be on the page for that. So then you need to put in wind turbines, solar, whatever. And the consenting process for that can be extremely problematic currently. Now, obviously, you can't push too hard because then you don't get reasonable views put forward. But I think if you have iwi on board and you have good communication into communities, then having one person able to stop a wind farm going forward is probably a bit crazy, was the kind of feeling. So maybe that's something that can happen there. I think the other main thing that we covered was that for companies to want to invest in this greater electricity generation, they need less ambiguity around the demand side. Yep. And so obviously, if you're going to generate a lot more electricity through putting in wind farms and so on, making hydrogen's all well and good, but right now the demand for that is perhaps a little limited. I mean, in the future we're going to hopefully have Global Bus Ventures turning coaches from Real Journeys into hydrogen-powered coaches that are going to go into Milford and so on, and they'll be all part of this nice package that's going forward. But that's going to take a little bit of time, and so in the meantime, maybe we need to be engaging with companies like Balance and encouraging them to put a fertiliser factory down here and turning some of that hydrogen into ammonia. Ammonia, of course, is also a fuel, as well as being able to be turned into fertilisers. Now, that's, of course, with the caveat that we are hopefully moving towards a more regenerative model of farming where less fertiliser is needed in time. But it's not going to go to zero overnight. And I think we currently import 2/3 of our fertiliser needs from Asia, so we could probably afford to be making some in Southland, which is such a good growing area. Have I kind of captured everything there, folks? We never got to education, but of course I'm passionate about the community engagement and making sure the team are on board with that.
I'm sure Amy will cover that. Amy?
Kia ora koutou. So our group took a bit of a different slant to everybody else, which is good. So I think I'll start with Donna made some really good points around this is a really good opportunity for the working group to reframe a system shift actually of how we can set up something totally different and quite unique and leading in the country. Cool. So I'll start with rangatiratanga. So with this being iwi-led, you know, our vision is 100 years and our priorities are quite strong and firm. We've got a firm foundation on what our values are, etc. And having a really good understanding of why do we want green energy here, Yes, we know it's of national interest, etc. And it can create an amazing ecosystem for Southland and for other industries. And I agree with everybody else, it is an and. But going back to rangatiratanga, it's also about building capability and building our local community and bringing everybody with us. And we also acknowledge that iwi need to step up in the space. Second is ki uta ki tai. So Elsa, I don't know if she's in the room, but she brought up a really good point yesterday about, you know, we can take water from the source, but then where does it go and how do we bring it back to the source? So all of those types of things we'd like to be included in the green energy corridor going forward. And then tikanga, what is our approach at all levels? National, international and regional. And my interest is regional development, so as much of that ecosystem we can retain in Southland, the better. But alongside that we need strong education, educational pathways, enterprise pathways, etc. Yes, I think I'll leave it there. Have I missed anything from our group? But yes, and we've got a great and unique narrative here. So it's how can we learn from the past and bring that through into telling what our green energy Murihiku story is.
Kia ora. So I'd love to get all of your notes, those that spoke, on behalf of the group, so we can capture all of that. There we go. Awesome.
You're welcome.
So we've got 1 minute. Anyone got anything else to say, or you know, or you're happy with where we've got to? Regina.
I just wanted to add something. So I think this is all incredibly exciting, and I'm really pleased and honoured to be able to be here today. And I was just wanted to add. So once people actually know what they want to do and what ecosystem they want to develop for in Murihiku, I think we need to think hard about how we can leverage that for international investment, because a lot of the aspirations that I've been hearing will not be paid for by us, that it will not be paid for by the government, because there just isn't enough money in the country, and that's not because Megan didn't promise, it's just there isn't enough money. So I think it's really good to have that in mind from the beginning. How can we lure investors in? Like the story about the whale oil, that worked because people wanted to buy whale oil, so that was external investment.
Fantastic. Right, excellent. Right, I'm just going to hand over now, just going to close up, hand over to you, Terry, just to close out the session.
Yeah, I'll just conclude. Everything that's come out of these forums is what we've all been thinking about. But it's actually it's like the rangatahi yesterday. I was waiting for their message, and so I've got a clear message here today when we're in Wellington and we're we're trying to drive it for Southland, for Murihiku. This is one of the most significant resets and opportunities that we've got. And the income and the drivers that come into this is bigger than an Aitahu claim settlement. Even our economist actually says that, and it encapsulates all our values, because the community's all got the 4 values, the same values we got. And as long as we sit within those values, we've got to clean up the environment. We've got to look at the good economics. We've got to look at health and indexing, and we've also, as iwi, we've got to protect our culture and heritage. And that's a big one for us at the moment at Tiwai, is protecting our culture and heritage. One of my tupunas, Captain James Joss, got land, customary land, allocated to him by the Paramount Chief, which was Tuawaiki. So, you know, that's how far back it goes about Tiwai. Captain Sterling is actually buried on that site, because Joss owned that whole peninsula at one stage, and then it transferred into the Guy Collier, and then there's some other parcels of land. So that's why I'm passionate about the clean up. I don't want it actually swallowed up by sea change, climate change, because then everything just actually leaches into the sea. So we don't know what the anaerobic clashes is from salt to fresh, And is that going to destroy our Minginga kai beds? You know, so that's a serious issue that we've got to actually get some science around. Is that a reality, or is it just a myth? We're not sure, because anaerobic can come in all sorts of shapes and form, and that's what I look at the regulators to actually protect our interests. So thanks for all your comments. Did we speak anything about the transmission, Dion? Because one of our other big tuckies was to Minister Woods, and that was actually the power must be retained in Murihiku. From Manapuri must be retained here. So we don't want to lose sight of that. If we haven't got an industry to replace Tiwai, if Tiwai decides to close, well then we will lose the power. Cool. The next session is Tiwai closure is here, education in the other room. So those are the next two sessions. I think Michael. 5 minute kind of changeover. If you want to go to the education and training, make your way. If you want to stay here.
Ka pai whānau. Just while Michael was sorting his presentation out, I thought it was pertinent to just give a quick kōrero on cultural understanding and who we are as a community and as a whānau, either Māori or non-Māori. Pākehā is a word that tends to be flown around quite a bit in terms of our non-Māori whānau. And for those that don't know, Pākehā is a term of endearment. You may have learnt something else in your education. It's not true. So if I can just give you the story about the word Pākehā. So in terms of Pākehā, a long time ago, as we were getting whalers and the European sailors coming here to Aotearoa, and especially here in the south, for the whaling, the sealing, the first ship that ever arrived to our shores showed up in a little bay here called Korako, or more currently known as Oraka, Colac Bay. Beautiful little bay. It's the Bahamas of the southern seas. So in our Bahamas here, there was one of our chiefs. He was there with his tribe, his iwi, his whānau, at the pā, which is the village. And the village was right next to the, it was on the shoreline to the beach. They saw this big brigade ship, this whaling ship, come into the bay. First time Māori had ever seen such a vessel. And as the ship was approaching closer and closer, the people, the tribe, were fearful. Never seen anything like it before in their lives. In a bit of panic, people were running around, worried and scared. The chief took it upon himself to say, "Kapai, māku e whakatiki ā rātou. I got this. Don't worry about it. I got this sorted." So the chief in his wisdom walked out into the water, and as he was walking out into the water, the longboats were being dropped into the water by the ship. And as the longboats were getting closer and closer, the chief was a bit worried himself, and he turned to his people and goes, "I've got this." And he looked out into the water, and as they were approaching closer and closer, in fact, they were meters from the shoreline, he pointed to the first boat and he goes, "Koutou mā, you fellas, Pākehā, Pākehā, Pākehā." And that's how Pākehā got their names. Kia ora.
Kia ora no tātou. Not a tough act to follow, but anyway. We're still an e-shot, that's unfortunate. Okay, so, we've got slides. Look at that. So I'm just going to really recap what has been happening within Awaroa, I guess, and ngā papatapurunanga in relation to the Tiwai closure since sort of mid this year, really, June. So as I mentioned yesterday, Murihiku Regeneration was really developed. I think I've got this clicker. How does this work? Here we go. Right. So it was developed directly in response to Rio's plans to close the smelter. Now, in the immediate wake of that announcement, basically all of the four papatipu, spearheaded by Hokonui, but all four were concerned by the following three things, which I'm sure they are reflected in all of Southlanders, which is the loss of high-income blue-collar jobs, right, and the consequent, or the fear that we would have then a rise in unemployment and welfare dependency in the region. The question about what to do, where to redeploy, how to reuse the Manapōuri, the 600 megawatt Manapōuri hydro scheme, and then of course questions about remediation of the Tiwai industrial site. So those aren't necessarily the order of preference for those questions, but they are sort of the order in which they developed, if that makes sense. So those three things then are the very basis of the development and ongoing existence of Murihiku Regeneration. But just to be clear that this presentation, this part, is we're solely focused on that third aspect, right, the remediation aspect. But I just wanted to make the point that it doesn't sit apart from those other two questions. So before we look at things, I think it's really helpful when it's I guess it's stuff that's happened over the last 4 or 5 months, discussions with council, discussions with Rio, and even some questions and conversation yesterday. I think it's helpful to have a bit more of a recap of Ngai Tahu, inverted commas, because it means different things to different people. So just so if I've got a baseline understanding, this should help us all. So, Te Runanga o Ngai Tahu, this is the mandated voice of the tribe, as per the Te Runanga o Ngai Tahu Act, private statute introduced in 1996. We have 18 constituent members, right? So they are our Papatapu Runanga. Now, each Papatapu Runanga centres on a particular locale, is in a particular place. So if you look at a map, there's 18 dots around the South Island. I mean, most of them are basically where whaling stations were, right? Coming back to the point yesterday, that's the whole point. So there are 18 groups, cumulatively that constitutes the tribe. Collectively, 4 of those 18 little dots are within the Southern region. So just for the record, they are Oraka Aparema, centred on Riverton, Hokonui, centred in the sort of Gore region, Waihopai here in Invercargill, and Awaroa at Bluff. Now, as I've got there on the middle bullet point, Papatapu Runanga tend to deal with local level issues, right, within their respective areas. And I just thought, one other point I want to draw attention to, there's no hard and fast boundaries necessarily between Runanga. There are areas where our interests overlap geographically and therefore politically, economically. So don't think about who's, where the line falls. There aren't necessarily lines. Fuzzy areas, right. So the Papatapu tend to deal with local levels. They might have a relationship with the primary schools closest to them, some obvious things like that. 2 or more Papatapu frequently cooperate, sometimes formally. They might be joint owners in a company that deals with particular issues, like Te Ao Marama is a good example, to deal with resource management things, or informally, right? Informal meetings where we come along, we're getting the same letter from the same organisation, but it's a one-off sort of thing, so we'll just get on the same page to send a reply. So where there are these regional questions where we have shared interests, we'll often cooperate. And that is how you understand the development and ongoing function of Murihiku Regeneration. Now the next layer then, and this kind of graduated understanding of the tribe, is Te Runanga o Ngai Tahu. So we have obviously a headquarters, our office, our registered offices in Christchurch. It is responsible for managing what we might think of as iwi-wide issues, which may or may not be sort of national level issues, not necessarily visible to New Zealand or New Zealanders as a whole, but they are iwi-wide. Then there are also things that are clearly New Zealand issues, and that is where Te Runanga has to step in and make some sort of declaration or take a position on behalf of the tribe as a whole. So what then does all of this mean for the potential closure of the Te Wai aluminium smelter and the remediation of that site? Well, basically, because the smelter is very much at the heart of Te Runanga o Awaroa, given that Awaroa is centred on Bluff, Te Runanga o Awaroa has primary responsibility for mana whenua and mana moana at Tiwai. Right, so we are and have consistently been the main contact point for NZAS, for Rio Tinto, for local government, so Environment Southland, central government, i.e. Ministry for the Environment, regarding the environmental aspects of the smelter's closure. But, it's a big but, that's why it's in capitals, given the regional significance of the site and of this question, Awaroa is obliged, right, to exercise this responsibility in close cooperation with the other 3 Papatapu Runanga in Murihiku. Right, so as a part of that, we communicate our efforts to and through and receive support and assistance from Murihiku Regeneration. And just to make a point, you can see where this is going, and right, given that the smelter's closure and the site remediation do raise a series of national level questions, inevitably, we Awaroa, we Ngā Papatapu Runanga o Murihiku, are supported in our efforts by Te Runanga o Ngai Tahu at the centre, and I'll touch on that again shortly. So the point then, the big takeaway is that Ngāi Tahu interests in a whole lot of things, including, or especially this Tiwai issue, are locally led, regionally focused, and centrally resourced. Okay, so there's the context. In light of all of that then, Te Rūnaka o Awaroa established a working group in June 2021. So of course we were party to conversations and things before that point, but at that sort of mid-year point we established a working group to focus on these environmental questions, the site remediation stuff. Now our group is inevitably, some of our questions and concerns are those shared by Southlanders as a whole, but we're particularly attentive to the significant archaeological and mahinga kai variables at play on the Tiwai Peninsula. So the Awaroa Working Group, as you can see here, consists of Dean Whanga, Gail Thompson. Now Gail's importance here is that she is our Awaroa representative to Te Rūnanga o Ngāi Tahu. So that's a direct connection into the centre. It's one of the reasons why she's there. Also Jackie Kane. Bluff Girl done good. She's on the committee. She works in the office of Ngāi Tahu. So again, this gives us another sort of personnel link into the centre. Amy Kyle over somewhere. Oh, there you are. Okay. I thought you took me seriously. I was going to throw to you, and you're like hiding away somewhere. Okay, she's there. I'm going to throw to you now, and me, because we're hard up for numbers. So through this working group, we've basically had a little document. I guess it's a note to ourselves, but also for the public. These are the things we're doing. These are our kind of bottom lines, and just plucked one out here, right? That Te Rūnaka o Awaroa, through our working group, right, undertakes to, quote, work with public and private entities to responsibly remediate the Tiwai Peninsula, and thinking about when we're writing this, June, July, beginning with detailed assessments as to the precise nature and extent of the problem or of the challenges we face there. So since mid-June, our working group has met formally at least 6 times. Been lots of little phone calls and whatnot on the side, but we've had at least six proper meetings. My diary tells me. In addition, we've met with representative staff from Murihiku Regeneration on at least 3 occasions. So that's up to 9 meetings. And we've likewise formally met Rio Tinto representatives on 3 occasions. Again, there's been some informal interactions in addition to that, but we've had 3 proper workouts. Most recently on the 12th of October to learn more about the company's detailed site investigations and their evolving closure plan. Okay, in addition to, to those informal meetings, we're obviously engaged with processes with Environment Southland and the Ministry for the Environment and so on. Current state of play, I don't know if I've got another, I've got, we'll come back to this last slide, right. So current state of play then, so some of you will know, but maybe not all of you, Te Rūnanga o Ngāi Tahu has just made funding available to us at Awaroa to help with these efforts, and with that money we'll be using most, maybe not all of it, to appoint a project manager to really ramp up the efforts of this group. And that person's initial task will include picking up and hopefully completing negotiations for an MOU between us and Rio, which we've sort of progressed but in fits and bursts, so that we'll look to conclude that. In parallel with this impending appointment, as a result of this funding from the centre, Dean Whanga and Jackie Kane have recently been appointed to the Tiwai Technical Working Group, which consists of local and central government representatives and various interest groups. This group met, I think, on the 18th of November, last Thursday, and our ongoing involvement with that group will be a really key focus for the Awaroa Working Group in 2022 and beyond. Are there any questions at this point? Okay. Right. So I was just going to the final slide. This was sort of a few of us, I don't know, not spitballing, but throwing paint at a wall or something. I guess so much of what we're doing is all in the same way that Murihiku Regeneration, the catalyst for its emergence was external, and so there are still these external questions which will really shape what we do. So I don't know if will I read through them and play PowerPoint karaoke. So I guess the things we're trying to get our head around is what is Rio Tinto's current thinking? does it wish to proceed with its closure plans or not? You know, we're working with Rio on the basis that it is happening, because that, you know, and they have to work on, the staff responsible for that have to work on the basis that that's happening. But of course, it's not a given, as I alluded to yesterday. If so, if it is closing, what does good site remediation look like, from Rio Tinto's vantage? And so there's this, you know, at the moment there's this kind of, not a divergence, but essentially different options between kind of industrial standards or recreational standards. What are the pros and cons of each thing? Are they the only two choices? These are the sort of things we have to get our head around. Are these kind of baselines or like world-leading stuff? These are questions we've got to get our head around also. What are the expectations of regulatory authorities, you know, the tribe beyond Awaroa, and the community more broadly? And then, if indeed Rio wishes to extend its operations at T1, of course that's contingent on a whole lot of conversations and decisions that we're ultimately not party to. We're really interested to know if any site remediation can occur alongside the ongoing potential production. And I must say that we've had discussions along those lines with Rio. It's been interesting and fruitful, but you know, the devil's in the detail, of course. So, you know, if so, where and to what extent? Through all of this, and still a big question for mana whenua is, what is the role for central government in site remediation? We're still unclear on that. What role does, you know, for example, the ministry see for the environment see for itself in this? But also at the executive level, what's cabinet thinking? If it knows, it certainly hasn't told us. And in any event, continued operations or a closure at this point or that point, how do we track and progress with this remediation stuff? You know, who does the reporting, by whom, to whom? These are all, although I think there's a lot of goodwill and the communication lines are open, I think we're very keen to have those things firmed up. And I guess my final question is, if the smelter does remain open beyond that current 2024 deadline, what planning, I mean, if any, but hopefully some, should continue in advance of its eventual closure? I mean, we must accept as a first principle that the smelter won't last forever, and so what do we do between now and that point? So I think that's better. So I don't know, do we want to, have we got time? Do people kind of write stuff and we report back? Was that how you wanted this to play out? Yes, no? What do we do? Do people want to just say stuff? I don't know. Yes, go. Let's do that. Sorry, say again? Yes, yes.
Has it already been decided that it's remediation and not restoration?
It hasn't been decided, but I don't read too much into that. I mean, I think that's the whole, I mean, you're right. Language is important, but it's small case. I guess I'm a non-technical, non-expert, non-technical in this field, so I'm using that as shorthand to mean something other than pulling the plug and walking away. But that's I'll write it down. I mean, there have been discussions of that sort within Awaroa, but again, because none of us on that committee are technical experts, as I term it, that might even be the best term to term it. We've not consciously decided on remediation over restoration. I guess a lot of the thing for us is the things we're aware of as just people who live at Bluff. We've got coastal erosion, we've got burial sites, we've got, you know, a whole lot of archaeological stuff that was excavated, I mean, with bulldozers when the site was built, and a lot of that was just shoved in bins, and it's in Southern Museum. Southern Museum's not in a good state. You know, there's all these kind of issues that have...
I'm not suggesting restoration is necessarily...
No. Of course. But, I mean, the point is, it's a really dynamic environment, right? So you have sea level rising, just you know, even if the smelter wasn't there, if it had never been built, we would still have issues there to do with the erosion of burial sites and things of that order. So in that sense, restoration might not be the best word either, but we've not ruled that out. I think.
Do they have a goal? You're working through this process.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a goal that you have in mind?
So I think the first goal is still, we're not there yet, is to fully grasp the nature and extent of the challenges we face. So I think we can't arrive at an ideal outcome or destination before we have that. We know we have a sense of the broad parameters, but I mean, personally, as a member of the committee, I don't feel that I have a firm enough grasp of of what we're dealing with exactly, and that is inevitably going to shape what, so.
Can I ask, I mean, it sounds to me like you're sort of not taking over, but certainly progress managing the whole thing. How do you fit in then with the City Council and with the Regional Council and the Great South and all these other organisations that come to be funded, and their role in all of this?
At some level, those organisations don't matter to us, although we're partners, although we're working together. But at some level, they don't matter because we existed before they did. Our interests predate theirs, and after they're wound up and absorbed into something else, we'll still be there. So we have a different sense, we have a different sense of time, different sense of scale. So that inevitably shapes, and we are sufficiently resourced that we're not required to wait for other people or watch other people. We can carve out our own space to be involved with this. I think that's, and I think that ought to be a great relief to the City Council, to Great South, to Rio Tinto, that we are actively engaged rather than passively engaged. I think that's something of an answer. Yeah. I think everyone's motives are as pure as snow, and it's all going to be peachy. Yeah.
Michael, I just wonder if it's useful for me to talk to the central government.
Please do. So Sean Lewis, Ministry for the Environment.
Yeah. So, kia ora koutou, I'm Sean Lewis.
I don't
need to stand up. Kia ora koutou. Is that working? Yep, it's working. I'm Sean Lewis from the Ministry for the Environment, and I'm part of the TY oversight group that has been established by Environment Southland, and someone talked about that. I think Wilma talked about that first thing this morning when she said that on that group is Environment Southland, Invercargill City, Ministry for the Environment, inviting DOC into that group, as well as regulators on behalf under the HASNO Act and for Culture and Heritage. And Ngāi Tahu at the Awarua Runaka level, and the National Office as well. So that's, we've met once. But they're not the only meetings that we've had. We've been working on this for some time. Well, I just want to answer your question, Michael, around what is the role for central government in site remediation. So Ministry for the Environment has no regulatory powers at all in this space. So we're really dependent on Environment Southland and Invercargill City Council to play their role as the regulator and make sure that they're on top of what's happening at Tiwai Point. What I can say is that my minister, Minister Parker, throughout the negotiations with Rio Tinto that happened over the last kind of 12 to 18 months, was very, very clear, and all three of those ministers were very, very clear that their bottom line was that Tiwai Point needed to be remediated, and Rio Tinto was responsible for that remediation. So that was their bottom line. I think that puts the Crown and Ngāi Tahu in a similar position, if you like, in terms of the expectations that we have of Rio, whether they stay or go, that site is remediated to a standard that's acceptable to Ngāi Tahu and the wider community of Southland and all of New Zealand, actually. So we're there to support. As Wilma said, the Crown has given some funding to Environment Southland to support them in their technical assessments of the detailed site investigations that Rio Tinto have been doing. That work is ongoing, so we're going through the 900-page detailed site investigation that Rio Tinto has made available to Environment Southland and publicly available. That's a reasonable chunk of work to get through and to understand what the gaps are, what the implications of the data are, and how Environment Southland as a regulator is going to respond. But for the oversight group, how's the oversight group going to respond to that report? So that's kind of where we're at. Minister Parker has, one of his points throughout the interactions with Rio was we are blind to the condition of the site at Tiwai Point. We know about the 300,000 tonnes spent cell lining, 230 something, Jen tells me. We know about the landfill, and we know about the activities on the site that could potentially produce soil contamination, water contamination. We just don't know the full extent of those and from the activities that have occurred over the last 50 years. So that's the task for us now, is to understand what the condition of the site is, and make sure that we stay aligned on our goal to remediate Te Point to a standard that's acceptable. So that's the not the Crown's position, I guess, or Minister's position, but that's where I
was going to say, don't sit down. If anyone has any questions for Sean, just ask him now. I'm happy to keep that if anyone does.
And Mike, I'm happy to answer questions too from Environment South perspective.
And John and I are also happy to answer questions.
We're all happy. Well, not, I'm not happy to answer questions, but they're all happy to answer questions.
This one may be more for Environment South, so thanks for offering to answer questions. But it's also equally for Michael, Amy, you guys. So obviously we don't know what the future holds in terms of TY, but if it were to continue in some shape or form, there are a number of consents that already exist around the landfill and discharges, etc. So I guess my question is, what role in particular from if I wear my iwi hat, what input do we have as iwi in that conversation, and how does that get influenced to in terms of the overall site?
Sure. Thanks, John. So the reason that we've asked for to formalise the conversations that we've been having to date with an oversight group is that we've retained some consultants, international consultants, to review the information that we have to date. Our purpose is to understand, as Mike said, the current state of the site, and to reflect the conversation from the previous two speakers. Until we know that, actually knowing exactly what the future holds is not that straightforward, which is why we need to have all the partners in the room for that conversation. So, and that's the reason why Awarua Runaka are there, and why Tūrananga Naita, who were there, as well as the Ministry and the other agencies that have the various but some very limited pieces of statutory capability in the space. Dealing with contamination of any kind is not easily defined, and the Resource Management Act really has its consenting functions, as you point out, as its primary levers around consenting. When it comes to remediation, the Act has a lot to say about monitoring and investigation, but very little to say about what happens as a result of that. So what the future strategy might be in relation to what happens as a result of understanding the state of contamination, that's to be determined, and that's why all of the partners are in the room.
Could you answer Dion's question about the consents, upcoming consents?
Sorry, was I not clear enough? So the consents are the major tool that exists at the moment inside the Resource Management Act to assist us. We have existing consents.
There's one coming up though, isn't it? Is that right?
There is a consent that's due, and there might be more than one, I think, due for renewal in about 2023 from memory. But there are a range of other consents, and whatever the response might be in that, in relation to what we find in terms of contamination at the moment, the RMA is our primary piece of legislation that we would enact.
Which is so flawed, isn't it? The RMA is
So my question is, if the monitoring and all of these contaminants, if I was a company with all that debt and money, I'd be happy to pay a $750 abatement notice, because that's all it's really worth on compliance stuff. So what's really the levers to really be holding to account, because when it comes to money and an abatement notice, $750, we've got the same problem up by our reserves in Christchurch, and that's all they get is a $750 fine where it's leaching into the water and mucking up our mahinga kai. So what's the real levers?
I could probably answer that from a Rio perspective.
Yeah, do you want to go to the mic?
Thank you. I mean, that's a great question, and yes, you're right. In the budgets that we operate on, $750 is nothing. You're absolutely right. But Rio Tinto learnt a lot last year from blowing up the ancient rock shelters in the Yukon Gorge. So, look, you know, in a way, it's a terrible thing that happened, but it's been a massive wake-up call for this company, and we've got a whole new leadership group in charge, and so they don't care about a $750 fine. You are absolutely right, but what they do care about is a global company that's trying to position itself to be at the forefront of decarbonising our economy, and a company that wants very much to have meaningful and collaborative relationships with Indigenous people around the world. So Rio Tinto has committed to remediating the site at Tiwai, and we don't know what that means, and I'm so sorry to have to keep delivering this message, but we have got uncertainty and we don't know what the community wants. We don't know if we'll be handing the keys over to Murihiku to build a hydrogen plant. We don't know if, you know, we'll be wanting the community, our people, our stakeholders, our families, our friends want us to remediate the site so it can be a park. You know, we don't know. So at the moment we're doing all our studies in a way that's sort of a bit open-ended, if you like, and it means that our closure study is not progressing as a normal closure study would progress, with a very finite timeline and a finite outcome. So we need to keep talking, and we need to keep the lines of communication really open. I think that's it's a big thing for us. But I mean, I know because I've put the press releases out. Rio Tinto has made that commitment to remediate the site. So you can hold them to that. And that is a much stronger thing to hold them to than a $750 fine, for sure.
And can I say, we do have cars under the Act that are more than $750 fines.
Yeah, but that just takes a lot of running time, and we don't have the time because we've got jobs. So this is it's a push-pull effect for Papasipu.
It's going to be a big job, and that's no doubt about that.
First, I'd like to acknowledge Awaroa's leadership in this kaupapa. And I really they are representing my tākitanga whenua for this area. I'd like to take it back a bit to some of the things you mentioned, Michael, about the gaps and some of the data. I mean, assessment's only as good as your data, and your remediation plan is only as good as that data in the first instance. Gone through the initial monitoring statement released, there's gaps in that data. So how have we positioned ourselves to be able to either be inputting to fill those gaps, either through outside consultants, or have oversight of how Rio Tinto are going to be providing more beneficial data so we can get a real clear picture of what's needed or what the issue is on the site.
So I can start there, and then Mike, maybe you can answer the second part of that question. I think, you know, it's valuable to us to know where you see gaps. So we would like that information, and whether you give that to Awaroa in the first instance, and again I echo your acknowledgement of Awaroa's involvement, and also acknowledge the time and resource that's required from a group of people who are already incredibly stretched. So we are hungry for the knowledge that Awaroa can give us, and we probably need to talk more deeply around how we support the resource to enable that, for sure. But you you know, also, I'll give you my card, and you can email me with anything you see. I think from my very limited understanding, we need to do greater work around the marine environment. I think that's probably something that's come through. And I think we're also, like, this is just the DSI that we put out, that's just the first step. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. There's a lot of talk and consultation that needs to happen around what the options are going forward, because there are multiple options. But again, I guess our processes, same as everyone in this room, we're hampered by the uncertainty and ambiguity. So, but thank you so much for your point, and we are really hungry for that knowledge, that iwi-based perspective to inform the process.
I just want to total for what Ricky said, and it's very reassuring for us at Wananga to have Aotearoa leading in this space. I connect with a lot of the community around freshwater and regeneration, restoration. The message that we're getting from our rangatahi is that the land and the water will not be healed until the people are healed, which means they're educated. So when we're talking about gaps in data, we need to be addressing those gaps in data, because those questions are questions that are being raised by the community. If we want to impact regeneration at scale in our kakiwa, those are gaps that we need to realise they're real, they need to be addressed, and we need to have third parties verifying all the data that's been coming forward and getting put into our plans.
I do just start speaking. Yeah. Oh, good everyone, just a total call again. What was said before by the two speakers, I guess there were two things I wanted to raise, because I've heard it again. We talk about data, and data is only as useful as the type of data that's getting inputted. And if you want to realise that most of the data that government captures is minimum compliance data, and that might tell you where there are some gaps, but it won't tell you at a granular level what's actually going on. So just be careful if you want to worship at the altar of data, that it's only as good as the person that put it in there. You know, there's this notion that all we've got to do is look to data, and data will not tell us all that. Data is only as good as the person that's inputting it. And currently in the sector that I'm in, the social services sector, the data we get is absolutely rubbish. It does not allow us to plan anything. So just mind you that, just to talk as well, because I stand here as a descendant, as an uri of Weremu Portiki, who spoke to the Smith-Nean Commission, and what year was that? Can you remember, Michael, historian?
No, 1891?
Yes. And what he did there was he told the story of Te Aunui, those falls that are at Mataura. And he lamented the fact that he had said to whoever the guy was that was walking around with him, who was the guy that was doing the Murihiku sale?
Oh, Mantau.
Mantau. He lamented to Mantau all the time and said, we treat our rivers like we do our whenua. There are whānau that own certain parts of the rivers. No one else, just because you're Ngaitahu doesn't mean you can go there. It actually belongs to whānau. And so, as you all know, those waterfalls do not exist now. So what I was just going to say, the Resource Management Act is one of the most flawed pieces of legislation we've got. Tony's absolutely right. If I was a business, I'd just be paying a $750 fine and carrying on and probably making millions in the interim for that. I know it's under review, but the thing to remember is we're in the point of transformation, which Terry and Aotearoa and then have grabbed onto. This isn't just about Murihiku regeneration. We're in a point of, we've got health reformation, we've got welfare reform, we've got housing reform. Everything that we plan here has to be in the context of that. For iwi, and I said this before, you know, councils are only 30 years, the 10-year plan review. We have to take a 100-year point, that's our first stopping point, to see where we are. So we have to be incredibly flexible. The relationships we have today may not be the relationships we have next year. The notion about, I was saying to Terry, the point about collaboration, in which we've found, you know, as a former researcher, we found that collaboration doesn't mean everyone comes in the room and there's a blank sheet and everyone just inputs into it. Collaboration requires leaders. And we have to, leaders have to lay down what those principles are that we're working to, and the rest of the collaborators either get behind it or you don't. That's fine, you don't have to be on it. But that's something I think that we need to remember, that this isn't something that's happening in a vacuum. There are a whole lot of things happening,
And we need to be able to draw all those things together if we're going to be successful down here in Murihiku. So, kia ora e toa.
We have 11 minutes, if we're going to time. If there are any other questions for anyone other than me, no, I can fumble an answer. No, but if there are any other questions, I guess now's the time because the clock is ticking. Absolutely. Do you want a mic or do you not want a mic? Hang on. Oh, you agree? Oh, stand here. You stand here, grab your choice.
At the risk of being tackled by Jan,
a couple of things, I suppose, from us. I think it comes down to trust and relationships is really where I see it coming from. You know, we undertook the DSI to understand where the contamination was on site. And we went looking for where we thought the greatest contamination would be. So as a result of that, we did 238, I think it was, boreholes to understand what that contamination looked like. Was it exhaustive? No, but working with Environment Southland, and really love to hear where you think there are gaps in the data, we'd like to close those gaps to make sure that not only the community, but our business also has, and the people working on site have a good understanding of what we need to do to remediate. But coming back to the points we've made, you're right, data's, or information, and the information we get from putting data in is only as good as the people who put it in. And that's really where I see there's a combined effort from all of us within the community to understand where those gaps are, close those gaps down, so everybody's walking away with a clear understanding of what needs to be done. In terms of the final landform of what the site would look like if the smelter was to close, in a way that's not really a decision that we can take alone. And it needs to be a decision that comes from the community, from the iwi, from Ngāi Tahu, to say the common landform is this, and this is what we work towards. Now, I do say as a representative of the business, that comes in a clear understanding of the cost of doing that, and understanding the time frame that evolves over. So really what I'd like to do is start to heal some of the trust issues that we might have between each other, and actually work together to actually solve some of those problems. And you know, if the smelter closes, and I've said it to a couple of people in the room, it's a social issue that requires a social problem, and it's not something that we can do alone. That's all I got.
Elsa.
It's a question for you, but sorry. I'm just trying to get my head around things, and I like to unpick it a bit. But you stay. I can track you down. For this, you know, we've spoken about data and completely understand that. But even to go further back, architecture is a huge thing. So architecture and the methodology in which to do this. So who's leading what architecture this review's been undertaken by, and who's deciding and designing the methodology in which to do it? It's a very policy question. Yeah, so if you create some... Yeah, so I'm assuming Rio Tinto has a standard process it uses when it goes to close a site, or a relatively... Yeah, so that's Rio Tinto's process. And it's its architecture, and it's its methodology. So is Ngāi Tahu to fit in with that, or will it be creating its own architecture and its own methodology?
There's no other question than that we have to do that, or we're passive. And when we talk about tikanga, people won't realise tikanga is your policy, your design, your approach. So when you hear us saying tikanga, that's what we're talking about. So when we say what's our tikanga here, what is our design, policy, approach, and the architecture required to do it?
Yeah, and I was just keen to see what your understanding of that was.
Look, my impression is we would want to achieve best practice, and we rely on GHT and other consultants to come in as third parties to assist us to do that, similar to the conversation we heard this morning, ensuring that we've got that right. I think the second part is communicating what we're finding with the relevant stakeholders, and ensuring that we've got clear visibility, and again coming down to, are there gaps in that process? And that's really where we want to close out.
To answer your question, Elsa, when we were doing the initial investigations, we actually also looked at the heritage. Michael Skerritt started unpacking all the information that we had from the Waihi Tapu sites, the burials, the uncatalogued artefacts that are sitting in the Southland Museum. Embarrassingly, there has been a huge, probably 40, 50 year lapse on that cataloguing. There's about 3 tonne, up to 3 tonne of uncatalogued artefacts sitting in the museum that come out of Tiwai. And you know, there was disturbed graves sites put back together, and you have to acknowledge the bulldozer driver at the time actually spotted it, put it back. And we've exhausted a lot of our avenues of actually digging up a lot of the information and asking for information, and we have got a huge cache of information, and we're just measuring the authorities to see whether there is transparency, there is truthfulness, and then we can move on. But what we're discovering is that information is getting withheld from us all the time. We make a request. There's delay after delay, and we're actually timelining all this. And when we actually have to go and actually stick up for our own cultural integrity, that's when you'll see it.
So Terry, will you share with us your information around the cultural heritage on the site? It's super valuable.
It's all there. You just got to go down that wall there, and just have a look at that wall. Yeah, it's on the website. We have been reluctant to put a lot of the information in the website because then it's actually a fiasco. So then organisations start getting attacked and criticised. And that's not what we want. We're looking for open transparency so we can actually move together, identify the fault lines and repair them. If they're too serious, well then we've got to make a decision whether we can repair them. I don't think we can repair a lot of them because a lot of the contaminations now, Jen, are down to the sand aquifers, which is the last aquifer.
I'll just say quickly, to come back to your point, Elsa, yeah, I mean, we understand that the sort of the methodology and process and everything that Rio are using, it's not Sermon on the Mount stuff. It's not the 13th commandment. We do understand someone that's a set of decisions and aesthetics that sit behind that. So that's that. Environment Southland is similarly commissioning its own international experts to kind of, I guess, review we're not going to go and do a third one. I just don't foresee that happening. I think the best that we can do, I mean, you played the hand you dealt, the best that we can do as Awaroa and probably as Te Runanga is just to fully understand what the pros and cons of each of those approaches and position ourselves accordingly. That might be, probably is the best that we can do. And whether or not that's good enough, I don't know. But because although this is a national level, this is only one of many national levels only one of many fires that Te Runanga is fighting. Because we're from here, we think it's the only one, but of course it's not. So I'd say, we live in a world of limited resources. I think we have one more question here, and then, is that right? Or were you like scratching? Yeah.
John mentioned this being a social problem. It's been a great discussion about site remediation. I was quite interested to know what Rio Tinto's involvement would be in social remediation. I'm not sort of suggesting that it needs to happen in terms of, like, it's their responsibility, but I was just wondering to what extent they might be involved in that side of things, sort of the people who will lose their jobs. And
so if I could just say two things. One, like I made it clear in our early slide that Murihiku Regeneration has 3 things it's focused on. And the first of those is the impact of job losses or retraining to something new. And so I intentionally haven't talked about it in this slide because this segment was really just focused on that third of those 3 things. So I think take heart that other parts of Murihiku Regeneration are thinking their way through those questions. Thinking about the social aspect in terms of the use and function of the peninsula beyond a smelter, there's an area there, I think, obviously for Rio Tinto to be thinking about. But part of that, again, is about what that end use might be, right? Whether it's industrial repurposing or whether it's something else. And that's going to have to shape what their social response is because it's going to have there are different conceivable social uses.
Yeah,
Yep, so
I'm interested to know sort of how involved Rio may be in that.
Hi, I'm John. It's 5 hours to my next drink. Look, it's a really powerful question. I mean, it's really a question that we struggle with. We have a workforce of direct employees of 850 people, and they have families outside of that. And we also have a large supply chain, and that's made up of both. Thanks for the Pākehā, so I try that word, but also Māori people who are working there with us. So it's an impact that's going to hit quite a lot of our region. The one thing we're really looking at is how do we actually prepare our workforce for retraining. So we're looking at programs like My Future Plan, engaging with educational institutes, engaging with other regional players such as Alliance, such as Fonterra, in terms of how we can actually help that workforce transition from one to the next. If we look at our workforce demographic, we do have a demographic that's very much right skewed. And so we do have some significant challenges in terms of retraining some of our people who've been there for their entire working careers. And we've got some employees that have been out there 47 years, which is quite significant. And 2 or 3 generations of people who are working together with their whānau. So it's, and I characterise Tiwai slightly different to any other site that I've worked on. I've worked on quite a lot of sites across the globe. It's not like any other industrial site that I've ever worked on. It's like a family. And that's the way we have to approach it. We have to approach it in terms of how do we uplift that family, and I'll try the word manaakitanga, how do we uplift them into a position that they can actually transition with honour into the next phase of their careers or their lives. So absolutely 100% committed, really want to understand what our workforce need, but also more importantly, what does the community need and what gaps can we help to fill by and through that transition. Hopefully that, yeah.
It was a good question. It was also the last question because it's lunchtime. Yeah, I mean, I'd just like to thank you all for coming to this session and not the other one because it's a popularity contest. Also, I'd just like to thank everyone for being quite forthright with their questions, but also their answers. And I think if we can keep doing more of this, then that's our best shot. I think that's really what it comes down to. So, thank you again, and kai time. All right.